When Elizabeth was born in September 1533, she entered a world of immense expectation and political upheaval. Her father, King Henry VIII, had torn England away from the Roman Catholic Church in order to marry her mother, Anne Boleyn. That act had not only shaken the foundations of religion in England, but also redefined the very notion of monarchy, as Henry established himself as supreme head of the Church of England. Elizabeth had been declared legitimate by her father and recognized as the heir presumptive after the removal of her half-sister Mary from the succession. In the first years of her life, Elizabeth was raised as a royal princess, with all the privileges such a title implied. She was placed under the care of Lady Margaret Bryan, a respected noblewoman who had also looked after Princess. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, took a keen interest in her upbringing and remained confident that she would soon provide Henry with the male heir he desired, which would solidify both her own position and Elizabeth's future. Anne Boleyn's political influence was strong but fragile. She had many enemies at court, some of whom had never accepted her as queen and viewed her rise as the product of ambition rather than divine right. In the years following Elizabeth's birth, Anne experienced several pregnancies, but none of them produced a living son. A particularly significant loss occurred in January 1536, when she miscarried what was believed to be a male child. The failure to produce a male heir was a devastating blow to Anne's standing. Around this same time, Henry's attentions began to shift toward another lady-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, who presented herself as modest, obedient, and devout. Political factions within Henry's court began to align against Anne. Leading among them was Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister, who had once supported Anne but now found himself in conflict with her over religious reforms and foreign policy. As Anne's relationship with the king became more strained, Cromwell and others seized the opportunity to remove her from power entirely. In April 1536, a series of charges were fabricated against Anne, accusing her of adultery with multiple men, incest with her own brother, and even conspiring to murder the king. Anne was arrested on May 2, 1536, and taken to the Tower of London. Over the following days, the alleged co-conspirators were also arrested, interrogated, and condemned. Anne maintained her innocence throughout, but she was found guilty by a jury of her peers, many of whom were politically motivated to secure her downfall. On May 19th, she was executed by beheading with a French swordsman, granted as an act of mercy by Henry. Anne Boleyn had been queen for just over 3 years. Her fall was swift, brutal, and calculated. For her daughter Elizabeth, the consequences were immediate and irreversible. At just 2 years and 8 months old, Elizabeth lost not only her mother, but also her status and legitimacy. Parliament passed the Second Act of Succession, which declared Elizabeth illegitimate, just as it had previously done with her half-sister Mary. The title of princess was taken from her, and she was now addressed as Lady Elizabeth. Her household was reduced in size and resources, and her place at court was no longer secure. The shift was not only legal but personal. Her father, who had once taken pride in her, now distanced himself. Elizabeth was no longer a central figure in the royal narrative. Shortly after Anne's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour, his third wife, on May 30, 1536, just 11 days later. Jane was politically cautious and personally reserved. Though she showed some kindness toward both Elizabeth and Mary, she did not act as a maternal figure. Her focus was clear: to bear the king a legitimate male heir, which she did in October 1537 with the birth of Edward VI. With Edward's birth, Henry finally had the son he had longed for, and the succession appeared settled in his eyes. Elizabeth, like Mary, became a sidelined figure in the royal family, acknowledged but of little political significance. Elizabeth was moved between various estates, often under the supervision of trusted noble families and caretakers. Though her position was diminished, her education was not neglected. She continued to receive a careful education. Her early studies included basic reading and writing, but by the time she was 4 or 5, she had already begun lessons in Latin and French. Her tutors, including William Grindal and later Roger Ascham, noted her quick mind, disciplined learning habits, and remarkable memory. These intellectual foundations built in the relative obscurity of her early childhood, would later become the bedrock of her authority and command as queen. In this environment, Elizabeth began to absorb the lessons of court life, not through direct involvement, but by observation. She lived in the shadow of major political changes, her father's further marriages, the execution of courtiers, and the rise and fall of powerful figures like Thomas Cromwell. These events shaped her understanding of power, loyalty, and survival. Though she was no longer a princess, Elizabeth remained the daughter of a king. Her path to the throne would not be straightforward, but it had not been entirely closed.